I am an awful man. I've known very little beauty in the world. Does that surprise you? If a man wishes to see beauty in the world, he must create it. My last wish, unwritten and unspoken, when I die, flowers will bloom from my eye sockets, the void where my lips once were spilling over with sugar. To see the world in blue, violet, and orange, the white of my skull, the ceiling of eternity, eternal night contained in my mouth, my ashes blowing over the ice caps of Mars. Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today I get to talk about James Nulick's The Moon Down to Earth. This is his most recent novel, put out by Expat Press, which is a new press to me. I'm always thrilled when I get to read something from the catalog of a press that's new to me. This is, however, not his most recent book. His most recent book, also by Expat Press, is a collection of short stories called Lazy Eyes. And in fact, one of the stories in there is dedicated to his one-time writing teacher, none other than William T. Vollmann. In fact, they keep in touch. James Nulick has Vollmann's home phone number and calls him each year to wish him a happy birthday. He gets a return call from Vollmann and they talk. And, I'm definitely not jealous at all. But listen, this is a really, really good book. What we have is what I could just summarily or blanket statingly refer to as a body drama. But that may sound like it has the tinge of condescension in it, and it is not meant to at all. What this book is, in large part, is a testament to the tyranny of our bodies. It represents a continuum of human life and the perils of aging, both actually internally and externally, not just the tyranny of the body, but also the tyranny of the mind, which is often at odds with the body. Our minds tend to get filled with more and more knowledge, and with maturation, provided that there aren't any, of course, mental debilitations such as Alzheimer's and so on, but our minds, if everything works out well, tend to get sharper and sharper and more mature, whereas our bodies deteriorate. So there's a tension between mind and body. But there's a continuum, like I said, represented throughout these characters. And what this book secondarily is a collection of character studies. The two main characters are Nathan Jason and Elizabeth Salas. They're separated by 20 years, but because of the way that Elizabeth has sort of let her body go, and this is a very, very complex topic, so I do not mean to cheapen it or naively say that it's just because she simply let her body go. There are serious issues and psychological traumas at play that feed into this. But nonetheless, it appears that their age difference, 23 on Jace's side and 43 on Elizabeth's side, is actually a much wider chasm than just 20 years because of the robustness and resilience and elasticity and youthfulness of Jace's physical appearance and the complete diametrically opposed qualities of Elizabeth, who becomes completely bedridden in a trailer. But this continuum that starts at roughly early 20s and goes all the way through the 70s, there is a neighbor of Elizabeth's and her mother Dolores named Mr. Nelson in the same trailer park, and he's 70 years old, and he represents another character who suffers from the tyranny of the body. Elizabeth is, in a sense, just letting herself go and eating herself to death, consuming unto death, whereas Mr. Nelson is drinking himself to death, another form of consumption, liquid versus solid. The setting is Rio Seco, and it appears that it may be in a sort of Arizona area town, in any case close to Mexico, close to Texas, the southwestern part of the United States. And there's a part of me that wants to refer to this book as being situated in the southwestern Gothic tradition, but that doesn't do it its full justice. Elizabeth is half Mexican, whereas Jace is half black and half Asian. So there's a lot of different mixes and ratios of identity, ethnicity in play here. But one thing I find so interesting is the way the book is structurally presented to us. We don't get any dialogue set off in the conventional style with new lines for new speakers and double quotes around spoken words. Instead, everything happens just in paragraph blocks without any distinguishing syntax for when it's a thought versus verbal. The sections, however, are set off and headed by a title that lets us know which character's head we're in. Everything in the whole book comes from an internal monologue. Even when interacting externally, it's still given through an internal monologue that's within the stream of thoughts. Furthermore, instead of even changing the perspective from first to third or second and so on between each character, every character their thoughts are presented in the first person. Early on in the book, Elizabeth's mother, Dolores, has this thought that maybe we were always meant to live inside our heads. So there's a drive towards immanence, towards solipsism in this book. Later on, Jace says, being alive but being out of your head is the best way to be. Too many people get trapped in their heads and they don't know how to get out. I know this to be true in my own life. And perhaps the most explicit tendency towards solipsism comes about midway through the book from Elizabeth. Committing suicide, I destroy the universe, or at least my version of it. So maybe also hinting at multiverse theory, a multiversed solipsism. But then within each of these sections, each of these serialized and interwoven interior monologues, the sentences are beautiful. And there's a parataxis that's going on that just continues to tack things together and subverts conventional syntax to yield the verisimilitude of how our thoughts spiral and ruminate. And that yields a beautiful prose poetry. But often I found this style, James Nulick's style of prose poetry, to be rather different from all the other instantiations with which I've had experience and pleasure. Here, the beauty of the poetics emanates from behind the words. When I was a child, I wanted to be a streetlight, tall, eternal, electrified, birds nesting in my hair, insulated copper wire drooping from pole to pole, concatenations like honeybees, the sound of 1,000 voices traveling along my body an antenna harnessing their desire. Wow. Nulick has said that this is a feminine novel. This embraces the anima more than the animus. This is apparent right from the title. We get two symbols that have long been the mother or the feminine or the fertile woman. We get moon and earth. And in the instances when we are within the mind of Elizabeth, we delve way more deeply than I think any of the other characters. Her yearning, her shame for being so large, her shame for not being beautiful, both the shame that comes from within herself and externally from her mother and from society, and the constant reinforcement or exacerbation of that shame during the years that she is a school counselor. And so after she becomes bedridden and the sight of her body becomes a microcosm of her entire fractured, tenuous universe, she orders pizzas from a local establishment named Pizza Belly. And this is what brings Jace into her life. He is one of the main employees who delivers pizzas, and she comes to start requesting him specifically. And thus starts the most brilliant and dynamic part of this whole novel, this interplay between these two seemingly opposites, especially outwardly, seemingly so different, yet inwardly so alike. And this spins up the whole theme of trying to claw our ways beyond superficialities like the body, like the way we speak, like gender, and even our names, which are, in the end, unnatural. Jace says people hung up on race and sex too much, hung up on names. The universe is cosmic. Thus, there is a Greek idea of the cosmopolitan or the universal. From within these different characters, we see them totally at odds with those around them who are chasing after things with a drive that is rooted in these superficialities, or what Jace and Elizabeth would consider nothingness or inconsequentialness. Too many are willing to divulge the secrets of the body too quickly. There is no mystery left in the world, just show and tell. Kind of reminds me of one of the great Cole Porter songs, Anything Goes. Those who show the most get the most stars, the most clicks, the most votes. Some even vote for themselves. This is one of my favorite lines in the book. What the star gatherers don't realize is one becomes very old very quickly when one is chasing emptiness. So what these characters seek is something that connects all of us, that's beyond these superficialities. And, this is a worn out cliche, which is so unfortunate because it's so important. And it just seems like one of those things that we don't truly grasp. I know I myself didn't until much later in life. The ephemeral, the superficial is just so much more blindingly attractive to us until we've had life experience, and usually in the form of letdowns or failures or traumas. We need to experience rejection and loss in order to have our youthful fingers pride of its grip around the nothingness and the star gathering. As Jace realizes alone in his room, he says, "The beating in my ears is the ocean. Our blood contains the same elements as the ocean. We are tide, the moon, the ocean, the stars." And yet, the poetry, the drive, the passion that's stirred when thinking in this naturalist mode, that we could return to a sort of primordial or perhaps prelapsarian roots with nature, is wonderful. Yet, how to obtain it, and what would happen if we were driven to the absolute limits of this impulse? Well, I believe we're shown that with the implications we're left with on the last page. After the last sentence closes in the book proper, we can hear the fatal echoes of its implication as to how Elizabeth determined to solve or maybe end this quest. One of the big tensions in this book is that young Jace has a girlfriend, Nicole, who is the embodiment of the playful, youthful, lithe, nubile girl, set in stark contrast to Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth keeps ordering large pepperoni pizzas so she can spend time with the object that's tethering her to existence, that being Jace. And Jace finds it very difficult to explain this time that he's constantly spending with Elizabeth. And of course, Nicole's jealousy is incited. This is only human. And we certainly get nods at other ideas that has come up throughout our history of dealing with this existential malaise. For example, there's a line that says, "Desire is the origin of all suffering." And this is one of the main tenets of Buddhism and Stoicism, for example. And whereas Elizabeth uses Jace as that object or that catalyst, maybe, Jace seems to use music as his means of escaping. "I've got my music. I've got my keyboards. That's how I bend time. But again, it's the contrasts that really makes this book work. And in fact, this is what Jace says about one of his roommates, nicknamed Baby. Baby doesn't count. He and I are too similar. We agree on too many things. He is a mirror reflection of me, and mirrors teach us nothing. Beautiful, beautiful aphorism, really, that ties in all the different things at play in this novel. I could sit here for the next hour and go through all of my notes and just read you beautiful line after beautiful line. But suffice it to say that you don't want to miss The Moon Down to Earth by James Nulick, out from Expat Press. I can't wait to go and start reading all of his other work. Fantastic job, James Nulick.